Hi and welcome back. It's Hannah here from Blue Ferret Boarding. We have been talking all of this month, July, about food for ferrets and what you should feed your ferrets to celebrate and as part of National Picnic Month. So this week 4, we're going to be talking about sick ferrets and what you can feed sick ferrets, because just like any other animal, including ourselves, often we lose our appetite when we're sick. So it's about trying to give them something that really piques their interest. So we're going to talk about that right now. So to be honest, this is partly about forward planning, and as I mentioned earlier in one of the videos briefly, start while your ferret's healthy. Start trying them on different foods. Try them with prawns, see how they like prawns. Try them with something like chicken, a bit of cooked chicken or even a bit of raw chicken, and just try them with lots of different bits of pieces. So when they're ill and they're already not really fancying anything, you can already introduce a food to them that they're familiar with, rather than a new smell, a completely new texture and a new taste that they've never had before. That's not really the time when they're poorly to be introducing those things. So forward plan and start, even if it's not their main diet, even if it's just the odd treat here and there, give them a prawn, the odd treat here and there, give them a bit of this pork, give them a bit of this beef, so they're familiar with it. You can give them any of those things as solid. And cooked chicken, just plain cooked chicken, cook it in a bit of rapeseed oil or a bit of vegetable oil. Rapeseed's a good one because that's fine for ferrets. And we'll fry it off in a little bit of oil till it's not super cooked and tough. We'll cook it so it's only just white, turned white. It probably wouldn't be quite cooked enough for a human. And that's just because it's a little bit easier on their tummy than raw chicken. And if they're poorly, something like that can just be the difference with them fancying it or not fancying it. Right. So it's about a higher volume of nutrients in a smaller quantity, because the likelihood is they're not going to want to eat as much. So it's about trying to get as much into them nutrient wise as possible in those fewer bites. And something like a bland chicken is great for that. Right. We very much recommend this AD Restorative Care. It's a pate. And what I would recommend though is not just giving it as a pate. It's still a little bit too thick for a ferret to want to just at. What we tend to do is put that, I will put a little bit of warm water in it, just a little bit, just warm, not hot. And then I put in some of our awesome, I might have mentioned it before, WD oil, War Dance oil. This is our own blend. It's recommended by vets. And it's a really good grooming oil generally. If you're not familiar with it, go onto our website. It's on our website and you can buy it now. But we will put a splurge of this in, which will just help make it palatable for them and make them want to enjoy it. So we will often just put some AD in a bowl, a little bit of water, a little bit of WD, stir it all up so it's much wetter and they can lap it a little bit more. It is taking the balance out, but if the ferret isn't too poorly, then that's fine, because they're still getting a good amount of water from the water and the oils in there. So it's still a reasonable balance to get that ferret eating. And then from there you can maybe add a little bit of raw, shred up a little bit of chicken and put it in there, so they're starting to get a bit of texture. Or start moving them onto raw chicken and then moving them onto slightly rawer chicken and raw chicken until they're on raw chicken, and then you can get them back to their normal foods. So it's about a process of how you go. However, if your ferret is so poorly that even or that AD with a little bit of water and a little bit of oil, you don't feel is really cutting it, it's not really, they're so poorly that it's not, maybe it's got enough nutrients in, you can start cooking what we call duck soup. And there's lots of different versions of it out there, but it's essentially a mix of chicken, cooked chicken or cooked duck, mainly cooked chicken, where you'll maybe make a broth from all the goodness. So it's the same as you'd make a chicken soup for a person, really. You might be using the bones of the chicken and the meat of the chicken, but obviously you would strain all of that and you'd separate the bones and the meat. You don't want cooked bones in that soup for your ferrets, the same way as you wouldn't for a human. So you'll take the goodness from the bones with the ferret meat, and then you might add some kidney to it, some liver to it, an egg to it. And I also make, and that would be sort of cooked and made into a soup, so it's blended together like a soup, and you can feed that to your ferret. I personally do what I call offal smoothie, which is similar, but it's raw. So I will put in there liver, heart, kidney, an egg, a good splurge of bog standard rapeseed oil, a bit of WD oil, a little bit of water. I might put some raw chicken in there, and then I've got like a NutriBullet kind of blender thing, but any blender, and I will buzz that all together, and it's horrid to look at and to smell. And you can also put a good glug of this stuff in there too, but and that's raw, and I will just feed that as a puree to a ferret that's poorly. And the kind of poorly we're talking about now is where you're having to spoon feed them or where you're having to syringe feed them, and that's what I'll talk about now. But offal smoothie is great. You can freeze it, you can freeze duck soup too into smaller portions, and it might be something that you want to be continually giving to your older ferrets to just keep their health and their nutritional value up. So another thing you can feed your ferrets, particularly for sick ferrets, but some people just always have this for some of their ferrets, and it might be if their ferret's a bit older they give this. Personally, we don't, but kitten milk is safe to give to a ferret. It's got all the bits that don't work for a ferret taken out of it, the same way as you would for a kitten. So this is quite good stuff, and we often get ferrets bringing us kitten milk and saying, can you mix whatever food it is they've brought with a little bit of kitten milk daily, and that's what our ferrets have. But I would always say make sure you've always got fresh, clean water available for your ferret in whatever format they like it, in a water bottle or in a bowl. And even in the winter, make sure that that is not frozen, and in the summer make sure that it's not warm, and make sure that they have plenty of it and it doesn't evaporate. That is especially important with kibble, and note that if they are on a kibble diet they will be drinking a lot more water. So then your ferret is too sick to eat himself. He's stopped, or she has stopped eating. You can't get them to eat of their own. You're having to tempt them to food. How do you do it? Well, I'll be honest, I start with Tommy Tippy spoons, so that if they bite on them it's not hurting their teeth at all, it's not cracking their teeth. I wouldn't leave these in the cage though, because they are quite rubbery. So if you've got a ferret that likes the old silicone and the old rubber, you might find it's one spoon but lots of smaller spoons by the time your ferret's finished with it. So I wouldn't leave it in the cage with them at all, but this is great. And these ones are those really posh ones where you put them in. Hang on a minute, actually I've got a cup of tea here. Here's a cup of tea I made earlier. There we go, stops dripping. These are those ones where if it's too hot it goes yellow, and that's not a bad thing if you're feeding them a warmer soup or anything like that, or if you're putting in a bit of warm water into it. They're geek posh, but they were on offer, that's why I got them. But these are actually ideal. They're a smaller amount of food as well, and I will literally hold the ferret in my arm, usually with a towel, a bit like you would a baby. I'd have probably a towel over my front going over my shoulder. I'll have a towel around the ferret, and then I'll probably have a bit of kitchen roll or something around here to catch the drips. And then I'll literally be holding the bowl underneath, and I'll be literally small spoonfuls, taking it to their mouth and letting them lick it off, which is when the fact that it's smooth, like an offal smoothie or a duck soup, if it's like a thicker, enough that it's not going to slide off too much, but enough that they can just lick it off without any biting. They can just lick and swallow, lick and swallow. That's what you're wanting. So if you're spoon feeding them like this, that's what you're after. And I would always say with a sick ferret, keep an eye on how much you're giving them, whether that's by saying, right, I'm going to put 2 big spoonfuls using this spoon. I'm going to put 2 spoonfuls into the bowl. Right, I'm going to feed him 2 spoonfuls. I know he's had 2 spoonfuls worth. Make a note. And then the next meal you give him another 2 spoonfuls. Okay, he's had 2 spoonfuls, that's great. Next meal, he's only had 1 spoonful. How do you feel about that? Do you feel as though he's not eating enough? You know your own ferret. And so it's about keeping a diary of how much they're eating and making sure that they're still eating a good amount. And then what we're talking about is syringe feeding. Now I haven't got a syringe with me, but I'll just quickly go over it because this could be an entire section itself. But again, hold your ferret. You've got a towel over you generally. I wrap them in a towel because they're ill, they're cold, and they're just feeling a bit bleh. I'll have usually a bit of kitchen roll. Hold them like that, and then you've got like 5 or 10 ml syringes. Obviously there's no needle on the end, and again you can get those from your vet. And you will probably have to find that your offal smoothie or your duck soup is a bit thinner to be pulled up through the syringe. That's the only thing. Or you might find you need to blitz it for longer if there's a lot of ligament and bits of flesh in there, to be honest. You might have to blend it more to cut all of that up so it doesn't get stuck in the syringe. But pull up your syringe, make it to the 5 ml mark or the 10 ml mark so that you again can have a good idea of how much they're eating, and then you're literally putting that gently. What I tend to do is put it between their 2 canine teeth and just open it up a little bit so it's between their canines. Open it up there and just a little bit in. You're not forcing it down their neck, you're not force feeding them, you're just putting a little bit in there and letting it dribble into their mouth a little bit more, and then hopefully they will swallow. So all they're having to do now, they're not even having to lick, they're just having to swallow. And if your ferret won't even swallow, for the love of God, take it to the vets. So syringe feed them. And again, what I would tend to do is I'll have an ice cream box or a tub of some sort, and you're looking at feeding them if they're not too poorly, every 4 hours. If they're a little bit more poorly, every 3 hours. If they're poorly, every 2 hours. And what you're looking for is you're feeding them every 2 hours, and they're going to need fed at night. So this is every 2 hours. And I've done this for a week. I was a bit rough by the end, but I will do that for my ferrets because they are my responsibility. So I will have a box, I will have several syringes in there, I will have a bowl or a jar, a shallow jar with a lid on it with the smoothie in it. I will have folded up bits of kitchen paper, kitchen roll, already folded, single sheets folded into 4, and then I'll have a bowl, an empty bowl that I can put the syringes in. And what I'll generally do is I'll have prepped up all of the syringes I can beforehand up to their mark, even 2 ml ones if that's all I've got in, 2 ml, 5 ml, 10 ml, and I'll have them all open, prepped with all of it in the bowl. I'll have spare in the shallow jar. I'll have loads of kitchen rolls stacked up ready just in little bits. And then I'll have a couple of towels and other odds and sods. I'll have the ferret and a very small, what we call a hospital cage, by my bed, and I'll have that on top with a bit of newspaper and those spare towels. And then I'll have my alarm set for every 2 hours, and all I have to do is get up, sit up in bed, get the ferret out, towel over my shoulder, ferret out, grab a piece of kitchen roll, hold it there, grab a syringe, feed them, get all that done, tidy myself up, dirty kitchen roll into a bag, towel back, ferret back, sleep for 2 hours. So I've got it streamlined, and honestly, it's really worth it. If you've got any questions about that, do let me know. All right, we'll see you next time.